And here we finally zoom out into the biggest frame of all, the cosmic one. The Rancher book describes a universe filled with life, purpose, and divine administration, where Earth occupies a unique and unusual place in cosmic history. In this segment, we explore how a broader cosmic perspective can transform fear into meaning. Because when you understand that you live in a living universe guided by divine love, even the strangest experiences begin to look like less chaos and more like part of a much larger story. So how can you put all this together? How is this all woven into the cosmic picture?
Well, our philosophy from the Urantia book tells us about not only the spirit realm of, a busy spiritual universe, but that there is life in other worlds too, that we're not alone. So it helps expand our framework of consciousness to include a big universe, a friendly universe. Um, and that feels safe to me. That feels good to know
Yeah.
that we're not just living in chaos, but we're just happen to be in a little spot of trouble in a whole big friendly universe. And so that gives us a sense of safety and grounding too. And I think that guides pretty much our whole life, um, whatever happens. That's something that I think goes back even to the days of the Bible when we're told that Cain was afraid to go into another land because he didn't have that tribal mark or something to
Yeah.
keep him safe, that they would recognize that, and we're told in the Urantia book that he gets his indwelling spirit. And that knowledge, that sense of confidence or power or spiritual power that comes with that, people recognized and they feared. Now, there should be no fear, but it's still, there's a certain strength that comes from that knowing of that God is with you that I think other people can notice. And that is part of what everyone wants, this age of disclosure. And I think we've already begun disclosure a long time
Yeah.
ago. The disclosure is opening up to the spirit and the power, the strength that comes with living with God like that, and accepting new experiences that we know are going to come our way in this life, in the universe. So it's a grounding, that faith. I mean, it's not just religion as people know it. It's a confidence that comes with knowing you're with God.
Yeah, the confidence and yeah, I think I don't know if you can say faith. It is faith, but it's undoubtful faith. I mean, you can cross anything, even if you don't know what's going on. And that's the thing. Many times, you don't know what's on the other side, but you just have to have that faith and put that action. And again, I mentioned Peterson a lot. I like what he says, that you have to have that faith, but you have to have that action as well. Not
Mm.
just wishing or, you know, putting your mind to it and letting the universe work for you, but putting your effort in trying to achieve that. If you want to have a better job, then you have to get better at skills. Have to learn. You have to get educated. You have to do this, that, and that. Can't just sit still. I can expect things to happen. That's the important thing that you do things. So, so
That's
really,
ex-
that's yeah, it's putting things into motion, into action. But there is still some other instances that I want to cover about, other paranormal experiences that you've had in your life. And I think there's an experience with your son with an Easter bunny.
well, that sounds strange in the first place, doesn't it? Um,
Yes.
I know. That's part of the reason that I haven't talked about it a lot. But my son was almost 5 years old. He was a month or so away from being 5 years old when I had this incident. It was a week before Easter, and he's the youngest of my four kids. I have three daughters that are older, so he was the last one to leave in the Easter bunny, basically, and
Hmm.
and one of those parents that let the stories be fun, and the Santa
Yeah.
Claus, the Easter bunny, the Tooth Fairy, and all of that. as long as they
As
were
long as
enjoying
they can, as long as they last, of course,
as
yeah.
long as they were enjoying it, yeah. So, he wasn't in school yet, he hadn't started kindergarten yet, and so there was no need to wake him up or anything, so I was in the kitchen getting breakfast ready for the girls, because they had to get off to school, and, he came into the kitchen and, was crying, and first thing in the morning, and I thought, "What had happened?" And, was crying and blinking real repeatedly and couldn't stop. And so I was like, "What's wrong, honey?" And he's like, "The Easter Bunny came and scared me." And I said, "Well, honey, you know, you know, it wasn't Easter yet."
Yeah,
I said, "It's the Easter Bunny. It's not time for the Easter Bunny."
yeah.
And he said, "But he came, and he scared me." And I said, "Well, sweetie, the Easter Bunny doesn't come for another week. So, and I said, "You must have had a dream. You must have had a dream." And he said, "It wasn't a dream." And he was pretty upset about it. He's like, "It wasn't a dream." And I said,
Okay.
"Well, maybe you saw something else that scared you." I said, "Did you see something move? You think a shadow moved? Or did we had a blow up Easter bunny in the hall by the kitchen." I said, "Did you maybe see that?" And because it was pink, it was big. Um, I said, "Did you maybe see that in the darkness or something? And could it have been?" He's like, "No, mommy, it wasn't. No, you know." And he said, I said, "Well, can you tell me what it looked like?" And he was, since he had been little, he had seemed to enjoy drawing with crayons and stuff. He started with little
Okay.
circles. He was in the high chair, and I have art history, so I remember one of my art teachers always said, "Give them plain paper and let them go, and you'll encourage their art." So that's what I did with him. The other kids didn't enjoy it so
Yeah,
much.
that
Well,
wasn't their thing. Yeah,
that wasn't your thing, but they could draw a little, but he really loved it, and he could sit there for a couple hours, and he started making
yeah.
things with little antlers and hands and faces and all. By the time he was that age that this happened, he was drawing pretty well. And I said, "Well, honey, can you show me? Because I've never seen the Easter Bunny." I was always a good girl and stayed asleep, when the Easter Bunny was supposed to come. I don't know
Yeah,
even what
yeah,
the Easter
yeah,
Bunny's
yeah.
supposed to look like,
Yeah, yeah, exactly,
No,
exactly.
I didn't say a good girl, but, I didn't want him to feel like he was bad or anything, but I said I was always asleep, I
Yeah,
never
yeah. That's
saw
something
the
that
Easter
doesn't
Bunny.
happen to
Might as
you.
well try to maintain the Easter Bunny story, and talk him
I
out of
think
it,
it's easier to see Santa Claus than to see the Easter Bunny, right? I don't know a
Yeah.
lot of stories about the Easter Bunny actually, but anyway, so this is interesting. So what happened?
So I said, "Can you draw a picture of what you saw for mommy so I can tell what you saw?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'll try." So I gave him paper, I gave him the pen, and he drew this picture, and it didn't look like an Easter bunny, obviously. It looked like an alien. And I didn't use that word, but and he had never really seen, I was pretty careful about what I let my kids see that could have been scary on TV or anything.
Mhm.
So I really didn't know the word. And when he drew that, I said, "Well, first of all, that's not the Easter bunny. But I want to tell you something so you don't worry because, honey, the doors are locked. Nobody's coming in the house. Daddy would get them if they did. That isn't the Easter bunny. And I've got to tell you the truth about the Easter bunny, that mommy's the one that makes the baskets for you and puts the candy in. Nobody's coming in our house. It's time that you're a grown up boy now. I'm going to tell you. It's a story. It's a fun story for little children to believe, but nobody's coming in our house. Nobody came in our house and the doors are locked." And he said, "Well, something was in the house. The Easter bunny was in the house, mommy." And he was determined. And all this time he's blinking and he's upset. You can see. And I said, "Well, I don't want you to think I don't believe you because I'm listening to you. I think it must have been a dream that just seemed very, very real. But, let's don't worry about it, mommy. I will make sure nothing can get in the house." And he said, "Well, I don't want the Easter bunny to come." and I don't want the candy. I don't want his candy. So he was really, it's this little child and telling me they don't even want their Easter candy, and I
Yeah,
said, well,
yeah. It made a big impression.
he
And what
better wake,
was it?
he was determined that he did not want the Easter bunny to come back or to come at all. Anyway, so, as time went on, time went by and he was pretty sensitive about it. He continued the blinking. I took him to the pediatrician and I said, listen, I don't know what has happened, but something scared him. And he woke up and he had this blinking tick and he thinks he saw something at night that scared him. He's calling it the Easter bunny. Obviously it's not. And he said, well, I think you should, I'm going to refer you to a counselor and you'll take him and see what they say. And I said, okay. So we went to this counselor and he questioned him and he said, you know, afterwards, I said, well, is there any way we can tell, what really happened? Can you, I said, I don't even know if you could even um, maybe hypnotize him or whatever to get more what's going on.
Yeah,
And he said, I'll be honest with you, he believes it's real. And no, the hypnotizing him won't change that. There's still no way to tell if it's real or if it was a dream because he believes it's real. And whatever happened, he believes is real. And his tick, the trauma is evident. So something happened that scared him. So that's all we could. And I don't
yeah.
know.
That
But
is something, the tick and because that like gave them a physical impression. So
yeah, really. So time went by. It was a few years later. We, the girls would tease him and stuff, about the Easter bunny. But we were all treating it like, okay, honey, you must have had a dream. But I believed he believed it was real or felt it was real. But we all tried to keep it lighthearted. Well,
yeah, yeah.
finally, the movie came out with Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And at the very end of that movie, there's
Oh
those
yes.
sweet looking little aliens. They don't look mean. They look kind.
When they
They
the door they open and they come out. Yes, of course.
come out.
Very very impressive scene. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, we made it through the whole movie and Josh was doing fine, but the minute he saw the fingers touching Richard Dreyfuss,
yeah.
he went crying to his room and he said, it's the Easter Bunny. And he was 8 years old by that time. And so I went after him. I said, honey, I, I said, it's just a movie now, you know. He said, no, but it's the Easter Bunny. And those fingers really set him off. And so I said, well, do you remember enough to draw it for mommy again? 'Cause I knew you drew it long ago, but can you draw it for me again? And then he drew a second picture and it's 3 years later. And it's very similar to the picture he saw, in those days. And it was
Yeah.
the same, like peeking around the wall of the kitchen. And I had asked him
Oh,
back
peeking.
in the
Oh,
day,
that's scary. So it was peeking around the
and
wall
it
of
was
the
peeking
kitchen.
around the wall, and it was the doorway actually where, because I had said to him before, I said, honey, if you were scared, why didn't you come and get mommy? Why didn't you come to me? And he said, because it was there, it was at the kitchen doorway. Well, it was standing in the kitchen doorway, and we had one of those ranch style homes where three bedrooms are on one end for the kids, and then the master's on the other end of the house. You
Yeah, you
know,
have to go across the
and so he had
house.
to go through the kitchen to get
Yeah.
to my room. So he couldn't. So he told me that. I said, "Well, so what did you do?" And he said, "I went and he went to my oldest daughter's room. She was 11 at the time, and he, laid in her bed, trying to be comforted, but she didn't wake up." And that's another thing. None of the other kids woke up or heard anything. None of us did. And so he was in her room, which was on the same right next to his, with the windows on the front side of the house. And he said at that time, now this 3 years had gone by, and I hadn't gotten this detail before, but he
Okay.
said he
Yeah.
looked at
This is
police
good.
as
Okay.
far as the trees. And I said, "What do you mean, honey? Police cars in the trees?" Well, he said, "The lights, the police lights, the from the police cars." We had a neighbor that he got arrested for domestic violence one time. The police cars came, the lights were going, and Josh knew. He knew the police cars with the lights.
Yeah.
So he was telling me, he's seeing police cars in the trees with the lights, which was just another thing that just complicated this whole story that made me question what really happened.
Really, that's so interesting, Susan. And
So
it's
then,
so eerie to the story of how the this being, let's call this alien, was speaking, because this is, clearly what, I don't know if you've seen the movie Communion,
yes, I
but
have.
oh, well, in Communion, one of the most impactful scenes to me is one of the aliens peeking outside of one of those. I don't know how to call it in English, but it's in Spanish. It's called a biombo. He kind of peeks out. I remember that causing such a big huge
Yeah.
impression, and it's just describing the same thing.
Yeah, he tried to come to me because he had come out of his room and come into the living room to come to my bedroom, and that stopped him. Whatever he saw
Yeah, you're not
was
going to go through that, and of course not.
blocking his way. Yeah. So he ran back the other way. Well, so then I guess the strangest thing as far as I'm concerned about it later was within short time I recognized that there was like a hard lump in my arm that I couldn't explain, but it was really bothering me. And it bothered me too. It seemed almost like it was, twitching or itching or whatever. And so after a couple of weeks of that, it was really kind of messing with me. I kind of dug it out or messed with it until I could get in a little white ball, a little white plastic. It seemed like plastic. I was able to get to come out of my arm. I still have a scar on my arm from it, but um, so
Really,
yeah, I didn't know, but I had this feeling. I know this sounds weird, but I had this feeling that it was like a tracking device, and I worried that they were going to come back and scare Josh or what. I don't didn't know what they were doing if they were real and coming, but I knew I didn't want it to continue to scare my kids. So I flushed that thing down the toilet, and I figured it was going to go to the city sewer and be not near our house anymore.
yeah, somewhere
Yeah,
far.
them to find us again if they were visiting, because I wasn't welcoming that, to have my kids scared to death or whatever was going on. But anyway, that was that.
Oh, that's an interesting story. I mean, and yeah, I mean, I mean, just from a couple of stories that you told, you definitely have had, these experiences, and how important, just to, I mean, we have to close the show, but to sum it up, and what can you say, from living this, which, goes from dreams, goes from premonitions, from, these situations to, physically something being there within your house. I mean, can we, especially in how you talking about the benign virus of love, how can you go beyond these situations, and grounded in spirit and grounded in God?
Well, first of all, I believe, whatever experiences we're having, there must be some reason, or even if we don't understand it, that's okay.
Yeah.
The best thing we can do is stay normal about it, do our best to, if we think of a way to help. I mean, it should seem pretty evident what to do, I guess. I don't know, but I don't have all the answers either, but I think um, if there's some way that it could be helpful, um, maybe that's the reason for it. I don't know. But I mean, I told you, I think about the man that I saw in my yard. It was a winter time, but it had been warm weather for a few days. And I saw a man walking through my yard, and he turned and stopped and looked right at me. And a couple days later, I saw on the news that he had been missing for a couple of weeks and they were looking for him. So I called, the tip line and said, listen, I just saw that guy in my yard a couple of days ago. And they said, are you sure it's him? I said, yeah. So they put me through a lot of questioning. How did I know him? Or I said, I don't know him. And they said, well, how did he get there? I said, well, I don't know. Maybe he took the bus, maybe he drove. I don't know. But I was rushing out to go to a class when it happened and I was running late. And I saw him, after he looked at me, he started walking toward the lake and the ice had been starting to melt. It was warm enough that I wasn't even wearing a coat.
Mm-hmm.
And so I yelled out to him. I was in a hurry, but I said, wait, don't go out on the lake because that ice isn't safe anymore. I said, whoa, wait. And he didn't even stop and listen. And so I yelled out really loud in case I thought maybe he didn't hear me, but it was not that far away. And I yelled, I said, stop. I said, don't go on the ice. The ice isn't safe. And he just kept walking. And I'm like, what are you going to do? And so I ran to the class, got to the class, came home. I looked out on the lake, to see if there was nobody there. And so I didn't think much more about it. I figured, well, he was fine, he left or
Yeah,
whatever.
whatever.
But it was 2 days later, I saw this on the news. And it was so weird because it was almost like the snapshot of him in the same coat looking right at me that was on TV as the missing
Really.
person. So there was no doubt in my mind that it was him. It was him.
And did they
And
ever find him?
well, that's the thing. I said to the police, I said, I saw this guy just 2 days ago and he was trying to walk out on the ice. I was trying to stop him, but he wouldn't listen. And I said, I'm kind of worried that he might have fallen through. I don't know if he's still missing. Has he showed up or what? And they said, no, he's still missing. So they sent a dive team, a rescue team out to come and search the lake. And they went under the ice. There was still a little bit of ice left by that time. And they went and they couldn't find anything. And so I thought, well, at least he made it off the ice or whatever.
Yeah.
It's out there somewhere. But it turned out it gave them, evidently, that experience gave them the idea because he had been last seen at a bar and there was a lake right by the bar. And he had left late at night at 3 when they closed the bar.
Yeah, that maybe fell into not
That
that
maybe,
place, but somewhere else.
maybe he had fallen through. And that's where they found his body. And they said he
Yeah.
had been dead for 2 weeks. He died that very night. And so what did I see? We don't believe in ghosts, but what did I see? Did I see,
Once again, yeah.
vision of him enough to, be sure it was him. Be sure it was, he was the missing person. But at the time I saw him, he looked real, and I thought he was just, you know,
Definitely, definitely. That's interesting. That's so eerie. I mean, I love these stories, Susan. We have to do more, and we have to do another podcast about these stories and these experiences. But we run out of time, and we're gonna have to go. But it's been really a pleasure. It's been interesting, and thanks for coming, and thanks to all of you for tuning in. Remember to subscribe. Remember to, I mean, we don't have to even hit the remember or notice button because we're basically all weeks, every week with different shows. So you can tune in every day. And if you liked it, please tell somebody that might be interested in might something, do service to them and teach them something. So till next time, I'm Santiago Kneeland. This is The Divine Within. Take care and carpe diem. On the Divine Within podcast, we'll share real conversations to help you find a personal connection with God. My goal is to support your faith, growth, and journey toward discovering the divine within yourself. Join us to deepen your faith and spiritual journey.